joining us on the first live podcast that we've done in over 2 years of 7 Million Bikes of Vietnam podcast. I'm excited to introduce my guest today. So he founded a creative agency back in 2002. Then he moved to Saigon in 2012 to set up and to help grow the agency. Then in 2014, he took over a co-working space called the Start Center, which grew into a thriving digital community until, of course, then COVID hit and changed everything. And so now he's pivoted, he's changed tack, and he's developed a course during the first lockdown to help entrepreneurs get more clients and automate their sales. So I'm excited to introduce my guest today is Martial Ganière.
Thanks for having me.
How's it going?
Doing great. Awesome.
That's a lie. No one's doing great and awesome.
No,
right
I'm loving this lockdown. I'm sorry.
Is that the truth? Is that right?
Is that the truth? Yes, I'm loving this lockdown.
Why is that?
I feel bad for so many people that are struggling right now, but actually for me, I told myself it's the occasion, the opportunity to really change everything in my life and just do what I always wanted to do. I had plenty of time. I had everything I needed, good internet, the fridge full. So I could focus on developing new stuff, work on my online course. And so no excuse to procrastinate now.
Nice. I'm trying to look into your eyes and be like, do you really mean that? Are you just telling us that? Or do you really mean that?
That's the truth. No, it's true.
So one of the things that when we were talking previously, I was very jealous that you had a swimming pool.
Yep.
And then you told me what happened to your swimming pool, if you want to share with people. And then I was like, oh, well, I'm not so jealous anymore.
True. Yeah. So last year for the first lockdown, we had the pool working, but somehow this year it turned more into a frog pond. Because we don't have anyone to come and clean it up. So I think it's lack of chlorine, and now we have lots of frogs in it. So it's more like a green pond. So not so nice. So I don't have a pool, unfortunately.
I was so jealous. I was like, what? You have a pool? And then you're like, no, it's not that exciting.
No, but I do have a nice garden. So that helps to be outside.
Yeah, that's that. I do. I'm very jealous of that. We have a very tiny balcony. Last week I tried to lie out on it. It's so small, like I can barely even fit lying down with my legs up. I did it for like 2 minutes. I was like, this is not comfortable at all. So I'm very jealous that you have a garden and an outside. Now, originally when we first met, I thought you were from France. I said I was talking to a friend and I was like, oh, you know that guy Martial, the French guy? And he's like, I'm pretty sure he's Swiss. And I was like, oh, all right, maybe then. So you're from Switzerland, and on the Vietnam podcast, we've actually had a couple of Swiss guests on the show. They were Swiss Vietnamese though. And I assume then you have a bit of a Vietnamese population in Switzerland then?
I didn't know any Vietnamese in Switzerland before getting here, except one Vietnamese shop just across from my office. So that was very convenient to buy Asian produce.
And what about, did they sell like pho and all of this stuff? Or?
Yeah, they sell all Asian produce, mostly imported from Thailand. And so I guess there is a bit of an Asian community buying from that shop. And so the owner is Vietnamese, and she would give me some alternative to how to cook some Vietnamese dishes. That was very interesting.
Nice. Well, one of the things we talked about with Nimai and was about how the stereotype of Switzerland is, cuckoo clocks and chocolate and mountains. And banks and corrupt bankers, I think was what we talked about. But the reality is a bit different, and what they were describing to me was it is quite multicultural as well, which I think from the outside, well, you are obviously a white guy, you just expect that most Swiss people would look like you, but in the reality, it is different, right?
Yeah, so we have 4 different linguistic regions, and we have also 20% of immigrants. Most of them are quite very well integrated into society. Some Africans, a lot of Eastern Europeans, We have a lot of big expat community too, English and Americans.
So what is the biggest? What is the biggest the biggest stereotype about Switzerland that isn't true?
Oh, I have to think about this one. One time someone told me that, oh, you don't have space. You guys don't play football because there's not enough space for a football court, you know, because we only have mountains, so you cannot play football. And I laughed when I heard that.
Switzerland used to have a pretty good football team when I was growing up. I don't know about these days.
No, they've never been that good.
They were all right. Like they got to the 94 World Cup, I think, right?
Yeah, I don't recall.
So for everyone that's watching this live, you know, so this is the difference, because all this shit talk that I can just edit out of the normal podcast and you don't get to hear all of this, but this is the benefit of the live podcast. You get to just hear me talking absolute shit. And so welcome. I hope you're enjoying it. But one of the things about Switzerland, did you see the Jordan Klepper video? No, not Jordan Klepper, but it was from the Daily Show about the gun culture in Switzerland.
Yes, I saw that. Yes. Yeah.
That for me was shocking, because Switzerland has, like, you know, really high gun ownership, like 97% or something crazy, but almost zero deaths from guns. So did you use a gun growing up and whatnot? Are you trained to use a gun?
Growing up, no. But I did the army. You know, it's mandatory for us. So I did have a gun. What I did is, you have the choice to return it or to keep it. Of course, you need a license, you need everything to go with. So I decided not to keep it. I don't have any use for it. And so usually most people have their gun in their basement, you know, in their cellar or in a locked locker. But now actually the army can keep it for you, just to avoid a bit of, you know, that hassle.
Yeah, because when we were talking, I think it was you, and I was saying about this gun ownership, and she was not too aware of it. She's like, well, I didn't know this. And then she was like, oh, wait, that makes sense. There used to always be soldiers on the like public transport with guns and things like that.
So no, usually people don't carry it around. They can't. The only time you can take it out of the house is when you go to the shooting range to rehearse. Every year you have to rehearse shooting. You know, so in an event of a war, you're ready. You know, you have your weapon, you have your sealed box of ammunition, and you're ready to go to war. The funny fact is that Switzerland never been in a war, so you know.
Yeah, I was about to say, who's getting into war with Switzerland?
Just in case Germany wants to invade.
So this is an ignorant question. I actually don't know the answer to this. Why is Switzerland always considered neutral? Is that actually true? Are they actually neutral? And why do they have this kind of status as a neutral country?
They are neutral. And I think the way they represent that is, Switzerland is the headquarters of the UN, and they have about 400 NGOs in Geneva. It's the capital of diplomacy, as they say. And so they really want to play on that. So one thing I learned as a kid is that we're not allowed to sell weapons to one part of the conflict, one side of the conflict. If there's a war between two countries, we can only sell to both or none. And this is how we are neutral.
Right.
Okay, so this is what I learned as a kid, and that's as far as I know about neutrality.
But does Switzerland manufacture many weapons?
Yes, a lot. That's
really?
a big thing. Yes, yes. We're very good at manufacturing weapons.
Wait, what? Okay, this is something, this is new information. Okay, so I kind of have the mindset as well that Switzerland is very small and flanked by mountains. I don't think it's small enough that you don't have a soccer field. I can imagine there's plenty of room for a soccer field, but I know you've got a massive pharmaceutical industry. I would never have imagined having where did this come from? So you have a massive manufacturing industry, but you're neutral, so you sell weapons to both sides.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about this right now. This was something we were always joking about as a kid, when I was a kid. But we are neutral. We cannot support one side of a conflict We have to support everyone. I think the only time we were involved was with the the war in the Eastern Europe, in Yugoslavia. So we did have some neutral force there just to help with the rescue, but that was our army sent there. So that's the only time we had our army out of the country.
Right. So that was my next question. So you have mandatory military training,
Yes.
but is that mostly to help out within your own country in terms of like if there's a natural disaster or whatnot, or if you're invaded, I guess? Like what is that? Would that be the purpose for having a
so yes, so that's what they sell us. So we keep paying for it because otherwise the army is totally useless, I would say. So it's mostly to help in terms of natural disasters. And even in terms of like social events, if there's like a big competition or national events, the army would help in for logistics and parking and all that stuff,
The army helps with parking.
Yeah, actually,
that's worse than the Vietnamese military helping with shopping.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, a great thing I did in the army, because actually I never practiced what I learned during the army, because my company was deemed obsolete right after I finished my training. I was assigned to a military hospital. And so what they called me for was to help during the Paralympics. So we held a Paralympics competition, and we had to help in to set up the ski slopes, and I had to carry the handicapped people, athletes, into the cable car. So that's what I did. But it's great.
It's very noble. It's a good thing.
It's a great experience. I love it. Yeah.
I'm sure. I'm still laughing so much that you can either support none or both. It's like two guys getting into a fist fight at the pub, and then someone coming up and breaking up and being like, guys, just leave it. Don't fight. But look, if you are going to fight each other, here's a baseball bat each.
Yeah, or I think we can sell, but only when the country is not in conflict. Something like that. You have to look it up. This
is so twisted. So we don't support anyone, but we do manufacture arms. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And then, so you do, I know I worked for a cancer research institute in New Zealand, and the director of that had worked for, what's the big medical facility in Switzerland now? My mind is blanking. Well, you have so many, right?
Yeah, you mean
like a research institute, a medical.
Oh, the CERN.
Not CERN, like more because that's more like physics, right? Like.
Yeah, physics. Yeah.
What's the medical research institute?
Most universities have a research institute.
Oh, okay, maybe.
Yeah, hospitals have a university department on the hospital. There's like 4 of them. I'm not sure which one.
I forgot you have CERN as well. Is that unnerving to have some massive experimental physics loop running? How big is it, like running under your country?
Yeah, I would be scared of the Switzerland turning into a black hole. But so it's right under Geneva, and it's
the capital of diplomacy has
a
potential black hole under it. Fantastic.
And it's also it's part of it is under France as well. So it's on the border of Switzerland, of Geneva and France, and it's right under the airport as well. So it's quite interesting.
I love this. It's under France as well, because if it gets fucked up for us, we're gonna fuck up France at the same time too.
Well, I think it's a European research center, so France is also quite involved in the process.
So how many people live in Switzerland?
We have like 8.5 million people.
How many people? What's the population of Switzerland?
So 8.5 million, 20%, like 2 million something of immigrants. So only like million Swiss people. Oh, wow. And we have a German-speaking part, 60%, a French-speaking part, 35%, and we have a Italian-speaking part, 3% or something like that. And we have a tiny little part that speaks like an old forgotten Latin. So,
oh, no way.
Yeah. Well, I guess young people, they just learn the German, which is like the main language in that region.
So I didn't realize Switzerland was so big, actually. Scotland's just about 5 million. I thought Switzerland was even smaller, so 8 million. But you guys punch above your weight with your CERN and your pharmaceuticals and your manufacturing, and then your cuckoo clocks as well. So where does that come from? This were you guys the inventors of cuckoo clocks?
I'm not sure about inventing it, but actually the watch industry.
Do you have one?
I don't have a cuckoo clock. The watch industry is quite big. It's a bit of our pride as well. So actually all this is like condensed into like 30% of the landscape, because 70% is mountain, and then 30% is the, you know, the countryside, the flat land where we can build cities and manufacturing.
Sweet. All right, nice. Okay, we'll move on from Switzerland. I'm doing Switzerland to death, but I do find this super funny and super interesting. And again, guys, I hope you're enjoying watching this live, because this is probably all the stuff that like would never make it to the final podcast if we did a record, did a recording. So you moved to Vietnam. You said 2012. Oh no, you started your 2012. You moved to Vietnam, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So what then? Why did you choose Vietnam? How did you end up here?
Yeah, so I first started with Thailand, Bangkok. I had a designer there working for my agency, and we wanted to develop Asia because I think it was relevant, you know, to be in Asia, especially after the 2009 economic crisis where I lost so many clients. And so being in Asia was a thing. And then I researched a few countries, and Vietnam was the only one that offered me 100% ownership of my company, offered me a resident card, and I could do everything with just a lawyer. So it was so convenient. I said, let's do it.
And that's changed now, right? That's not possible, is it?
It's still possible. So that was, I think it was the first year, 2012, where you could do it for IT. So I registered an IT company, and that was the first year you could do that. So I was one of the first. Before you needed a Vietnamese partner. You can do that as a restaurant owner as well. You can do that in a few industries, but it's quite limited, yes.
The last because I looked into this, and I heard that because obviously, you know, there's been a massive change in visa laws, and I call it the great expat exodus, as so many people have had to leave Vietnam because of those changes. And I didn't look into it for myself, but I know other people that looked into it. As far as I know, the law right now, if you own a business, to be able to get a resident card, you need to have a minimum investment of 3 billion dong, which is about $130,000.
So yeah, that changed. Before it was a lot easier. So they were asking me like $50,000, you know, to set up shop, and I said, like, to make websites, it's too much. Can we do with 30? I said, yeah, sure. So, you know, it worked. Everything is negotiable.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so because we set up 7 million bikes as a business this year, and they kind of said, oh, you need to have X amount of money in the bank. And I was like, well, can we put this amount of money in? They're like, yeah, that's fine. Okay. So did Vietnam 2012, I asked this question a lot on the podcast. We have people who've been on the show from various times. Like I think the guest who'd been here the earliest was Edith Gerardo, who first came to Vietnam 40 years ago. And then people from varying like to 10, 20, 30. 2012, tell people here that are listening, I think I know some of the people here anyway, and some are Vietnamese, so they obviously know what it was like. But for you, what was Vietnam like in 2012? Because I know from me arriving in 2006, it was so different.
Yes, it was very different indeed. It was already bustling, but I think it's even worse now, for the worse and the better. So traffic was kind of fun back then. I loved it. So it was hectic, but actually you could still cross the road without worrying too much. Now in some places it's quite dodgy. So it was less polluted. It was nicer in terms of streets, less cars, a lot less cars. So that what struck me most. There was not many options in terms of like Western food, Western restaurants, and all the bars we have now. So Bui Vien was pretty lame.
Bui Vien was better. So when we first arrived, like you know, everyone warned us not to go to Boy Vienne, but we went mostly because we were studying literally at the end of Boy Vienne, so it just made sense to go there. But it was still quite fun. It was still local. It wasn't so crazy. It was crazy, but not as crazy as it is now. And over the last year or so, Adrian and I have just driven down there just to see what it's like. Maybe if we're in the neighborhood and we're on the bike, we're like, let's just drive down Boy Vienne to see what it's like. And it's mental now.
True. It's so different. It's unrecognizable.
I think what people expected to happen a few years ago was it just became super like, I don't know what to use the word, like Americanized or developed or commercialized, maybe is the word I'm looking for, because there was already like a Starbucks had opened. There was Burger King had opened and a few other kind of like those kind of stores. And I think at the time, what we talked about and others, I think, was that it was going to end up becoming just super commercialized, you know, like another kind of one of all these corporations and stuff. But it's gone in a completely different direction. I don't know when the last time you went down, or anyone who's listening, when was the last time you went to Boy Vienne? It's now just like a competition to see which bar can be the most obnoxious, the loudest. There's just there was always kind of like seemed to be quite a lot of aggression and fights, but from what I could see online anyway, that even seemed to increase as well. So I think it's probably changed now again during the pandemic, but it's almost as well. It went from being a super tourist spot to now becoming more for the locals, almost, from what I can see.
Yes, definitely. Before the lockdown, it started looking very much like Khao San Road in Bangkok. So I thought it was getting towards that direction.
Yeah. When we were there, if everyone can remember, when traveling was allowed, my aunt had visited and we were around the Boy Vienne region and we were walking down, and of course she walks by the guy in the corner and he's like, Madam, marijuana, cocaine. And my aunt, she's like in her 60s or something. She's like, what did he just ask me? And he's like, he asked you if you wanted marijuana or cocaine. She's like, what? I was like, yeah, welcome to Boy Vienne. That's it. But what you said about the cars as well. So, I mean, so again, for me coming 2016, there was very few cars on the road, but that like has exponentially increased. So 2012, there must have been very few cars on the road back then.
Sure, only taxis most of the time.
Yeah.
Maybe corporate cars or like those 7-seaters that you could rent for the day.
And then that was it, right? Mm-hmm. And then so this was a question I asked a couple of seasons ago, was would you rather live in Vietnam now or 20 years ago? What would you say?
That's a very good question. I would say now, just because now you have access to a lot more food and comfort food and wine, and I was starting to miss those cheese and bread, and now we have all this. So of course the experience would have been more authentic maybe 20 years ago, but now I'm loving it too. Yeah, and well, do you know what I realized as I was asking that question throughout the season? It's one of these like quite I kind of not regret asking the question, but it's such a Western centric point of view, because I think it was a Vietnamese guest pointed out to me. He's like, yeah, well, like 20 years ago, the country was poorer. And I think as a Westerner, we can romanticize it like, oh, it would have been so amazing to have been here 20 years ago. It would have been more authentic and simpler and blah, 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 blah. But we're just looking at it from our point of view, which is the only point of view you can really have until you kind of think of others. But your original point of view is your own point of view. So exactly like you said, now we're like, oh, there's more food and things like this. But I think, and it'd be interesting to hear from some of the Vietnamese people that are here afterwards, what did they think of that question? Because for them 20 years ago, they'd probably be like, why would we want to be 20 years ago? Like the country was poorer. We didn't have as many options. Now, like things are so much better. So it is a very Western centric question. And I think, yeah, I even see other people talk about, I've said it before, I'd love to have gone to Cambodia 20 years ago, or I'd have loved to have been in Vietnam 20 years ago. But I think we are easily romanticizing the fact that like, oh yeah, it would have been such a nice experience for us, because then we get to leave and go back to our cozy Western existence. But for the people that are living that experience, it's not so nice. So even though I think the question is an interesting question to ask, I do have that caveat to add to it. I think that's a very good point, if I may. I like now that young people can open shop, like coffee shops and businesses and design shop. And that's something we could not see when I first arrived here. And now you see those young people building businesses, and I love that. And I think this is great for them. So exactly, I would not want them to go back 20 years ago. But actually, instead of 20 years ago, I would say maybe before the 70s, I would love to go at that time to see how it was before 75.
Yeah, that's a whole different story, right? Because I've heard stories about how there was like a thriving music scene, and Le, who's here on the call, and we used to work together, and we are good friends, and she's told me stories about her family from back then, and the things I've heard from back in pre-1975. That would be a kind of cool time to, and I know it's quite sad as well, because Vietnam, from my understanding, which is a very limited understanding of Saigon at least, lost a lot of that culture, lost a lot of that music culture and art scene post 1975. But I guess it's exciting to see it's starting to come back. And that's exciting what you're saying about the opportunities for young people. You know, things like coffee shops every day. Well, before this lockdown, but every day there was like a new coffee shop opening, and you would go in and it would be clearly owned by a young Vietnamese person.
Yeah, sure.
So how is that changing? So tell us about then your business. 2012, you came here, you started a business. You don't need to go into too much of the direct challenges that you faced as a business owner in Vietnam, because I'm sure that's a very loaded question. But some of the challenges of starting a business in Vietnam, and the differences that you've seen during that time, which you've touched on.
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge was the staff recruitment. Finding the right people, trying to be understood and understand them was a big challenge for me. I lost so many staff for the first 2 years. Was very hard to retain because I think I was too small and I was like the white guy trying to build a business here. So that was a no-go for most Vietnamese that wanted a stable job in a big corporation, a big name, just to show their friends they work at that big company. So they had little trust in startups back then. And I think that changed too, that evolved for the last 10 years.
And well, would you say that there's more and more young Vietnamese people at the forefront of those startups, like doing their own startups?
Yeah, so the startups are more popular. Back then, it was not really a thing. Their family would dictate what they do and where they work. So starting a new business or a startup was not stable enough, to sustain the family. So usually the parents would say no, or they would do that without telling their parents. I had one designer, and one day he didn't come to work. It's like, where are you? It's like, oh, my parents doesn't want me to go to work. She wants me back in school. It's like, I didn't know you were still in school. You didn't tell me. So now I think that it's a bit more widespread and a lot of people are trying to build businesses, but mostly on the side. It's like side hustles. But as soon as they make money, they quit their job and they go full on, which is great. Actually, I really love that.
Well, I'm just trying to remember. I can't remember at the moment who it was, but I just heard someone say just last week, Saigon is one of the greatest places right now for startups and entrepreneurship. And so would you agree with that? And if so, why is that?
Yes, I do agree. Vietnam is number 3 on the map in Southeast Asia regarding the startup ecosystem. Number 1 being Indonesia, and second, Singapore. Vietnam is 3rd, and Vietnam is very attractive for startups. The main reason is that it's a big market that is untapped in a lot of different industries. So a lot of Singaporeans or Asians wants to come to Vietnam to launch a business in the market.
So I have a really stupid question for you, okay? But I like asking stupid questions, even though it makes me look stupid. What is a startup?
I don't think it's a stupid question.
Good, okay, thank you. And actually, I'm asking it genuinely because it's one of these phrases or terms that's thrown about. And I like, oh yeah, startup. And then I think, I don't actually really know what it is.
I think that's a good question. And that reminds me of a story back in the days. I used to be invited to startup competition where I would mentor or coach the applicants to the competition. And I met a young guy and he told me, oh, I'm building a startup too. And I said, oh, what is it? I'm opening a coffee shop. And I laughed, you know. So a startup is actually a business idea that wants to disrupt an industry or a market and that wants to accelerate super fast. The idea is to raise money and then to investors want to exit after a few years or maybe 10 years and cash big money. So they're looking for business idea that disrupts markets, just like Uber did or Airbnb did, and that improves lives like 10 times. You know, they want a 10x difference disruption.
Okay, so that is what I thought of a startup. Was Uber was the first thing that came to mind. But I was thinking what you said there. So why is I was kind of thinking like, why is a coffee shop not a startup? Like, what's the difference between just starting a business? Is not all businesses a startup? So now that you've cleared up what a startup is, which is what I imagined it to be, why are they so common? Is it just greed that people, because you say like the 10x, they want to scale up quickly, they want investment? Is it just like a get rich quick scheme almost, you know, like a 21st century get rich quick scheme? If I start everyone wants a disruptive technology, right? That's the buzzword, right? We're going to do a disruptive technology. And then we're going to get investment, then we're going to be the next Uber. But that is one of these things that probably only happens to like 1% or 0.1%. So sorry, I asked about 5 questions in the one thing there, but you can comment on that.
Yeah, so I think it's a bit of different things. Everyone has a different motivation when they start a startup. Some of them is the gold rush, you know, it's the new gold rush. They're trying to get big or to get famous or to make big money. Others, they're passionate about what they do. And I think most entrepreneurs that are successful, they're just passionate. They want to solve a problem. They know how to apply technology to solve a physical problem we have or a problem we have in one industry. And that's what they do. They just love doing that. And that's very remarkable.
So you mentioned that Saigon is a big place for startups because it's kind of untouched, and that would make sense. So would it then, for people doing startups here, in my mind immediately, would it not then just to be replicate what is done in other countries? So my example would be Uber or Grab or and again, it blows my mind that in the time I've been here, when we first arrived 2016, ride hailing apps didn't exist here. Like we still got Zayoms. There was still, I never really see a guy on the street trying to sell you his motorbike services, but that was normal. And again, that was part of the charm of Vietnam. And that almost ties into that romanticism of like, oh, it was so cute when you could just get a Zayom on the street. But like, yeah, how much was the guy making? Now a guy's on Grab and he's just literally just making money all day, every day. And I don't know the economics of that. Maybe he's making less money on Grab and he made more money as a private Zayom. I don't know. So maybe what I just said there is not true. But yeah, I kind of forgot my point now.
Yes, there are some startups trying to replicate a model we have in the US or in Europe. Lazada was one, for example, trying to replicate Amazon. Others are trying new models, new things, because it's cheap to fail. And I think that's very important. Vietnam is cheap to fail. It's easy to find motivated people, build a team, test things. You can either test abroad online or you can test here. And if it works, you can scale in Southeast Asia.
So you say it's cheaper, okay? And I see this in the restaurant industry as well, that a lot of restaurants come and go in my time here. They open up quickly, then they disappear overnight almost. And you're kind of like, oh, well, it's so cheap here. But things still cost here. Like so you say it's cheap, but it still costs tens of thousands of dollars, right? So it means that it's not like any old person with no money can just come in and be like, well, I'm going to do this and that. You still need to have backing, right? It's just that it's going to cost you less than it would somewhere else. Is that what it means?
Yes, that's correct. It's true that I didn't find it that cheap either, especially when you see all the costs and everything you need to run, like a lot of bureaucracy to run your business. But, you know, for Singaporeans, for Japanese, for Koreans I worked with, for them, it's still very cheap.
So we're talking about people that already have a bit of financial backing and coming in. But are you seeing, so you're talking about young Vietnamese people becoming entrepreneurs. So do they have financial backing behind them, or they are able to start kind of from the ground up?
Some do. I would say most of them, they just bootstrap with nothing. They just work from their home or from coffee shop. They cannot even afford a co-working space most of the time. So, you know, when people ask me like, oh, I want to see startups in your co-working space, like go to coffee shops, you'll see startups.
Yeah, that's true, right? Yeah, you're always seeing people like, I go to a coffee shop, they're coding or doing something on the, and it's way cheaper than that. That's why you see people buy like a 20,000 dong coffee and they're there for 4 hours, right, on the Wi-Fi using the electricity.
Exactly, or monitoring Bitcoins, you know, you see that a lot too.
Oh, is that a thing as well?
So I see a lot of Viet Q coming back to build a business here. That's a good thing too.
And is that one of your kind of clientele base?
Some of them, yes, more expats, but Viet Q, Vietnamese from abroad, they're coming back to the country and building a new business.
Yeah, and the guest, the episode that just came out on the podcast literally today, she's Vietnamese and she's a entrepreneur. She runs English language schools, and really interesting. So one of her target audiences is Viet Qs returning to Vietnam, but teaching them Vietnamese. And because again, this is something we've touched on the podcast on a couple of episodes before, is that it's really fascinating to me. So people who have left Vietnam around 1975 or the preceding years, moved to the US, settled down, or any country, even Switzerland, settled down. It's fascinating that the language got frozen in time because they left. So they speak fluent Vietnamese, but it never developed past that. So there's certain words that have changed. So I know, for example, airport is one of them, and we can clarify with some of the Vietnamese that are listening afterwards. But I know that airport was one of the words that it's now just a different word than it used to be. And so the language that they learn as like first generation immigrants in another country, the Vietnamese that they learn from their parents, they then come back to Vietnam to reconnect with their roots, and they speak a different version of Vietnamese. So she actually, part of her school is to teach modern Vietnamese to these returning Viet Qs, which I think is really cool.
It's
now,
true.
oh, sorry. On you go, sorry.
Yeah, it's true that you can tell a Viet Q versus a Vietnamese when they speak Vietnamese, and they're often like looked down from Vietnamese, from locals.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well. Yeah. So we'll fast forward now, but we'll also go back to what you said at the beginning of the podcast. You said you're doing great during lockdown, which is good to hear. And like you said as well, you've got some perspective, and I'm the same. My lockdown has not been the worst for me. It's not much. It's not fun. It's not normal life, but I feel very, very lucky for what I do have. But so explain to us then. So tell us a little bit about you. You opened up your business, came 2012. You had a co-working space, as I mentioned at the beginning. Tell us kind of like how did that develop, just kind of pre-lockdown and post-lockdown? So you don't need to go back too far, but then how did it develop, like early 2021 to then where you are now?
Yes, so the big change happened during the first lockdown, March 2020, where most digital nomads left the country. They got scared and they just returned to their country. And so ever since we reopened, it was never the same. There's not enough foreigners in the country to really build a community of digital nomads. So we were trying to cater to locals, trying to cater to expats here. Not that easy. And the second lockdown hit in late May this year. And I said, okay, it's time to pivot. It's time to really focus online, because we never know what's going to happen in the future. We cannot just expect the country to reopen anymore. So that was a big mindset shift, I would say. So I did not, the first lockdown was more of a holiday, but this time it's like, no, now I'm going to work, I'm going to find clients, I'm going to pivot. And I did a first project in the first week of the lockdown for a Swiss startup as a consultant. So that was a great first project. And then I ran a few of my storytelling workshops for some businesses, both in Vietnam and abroad. And I developed my course. I have more clients now because it's word of mouth. You know, the first clients at the beginning of lockdown are happy. So now they're referring me more clients. So I'm making more money during this lockdown than I did in the whole last year, you know. So now I see a brighter future online, which I was quite reluctant in the past, because for a community, I like I like meeting people in person. I like physical events, but now I think we have to go online, and if we can, we're going to do offline events.
No, that's great to hear. And it's one of these things, when you're put under a certain amount of pressure, like good things can happen, right? And I know maybe some people even listening right now might be like, oh, you're making more money now, like, but that's obviously not a bad thing. And I know throughout history, if you go back to like the Great Depression in the was it 1918? Maybe I got my dates wrong there, but the Great Depression in the US, even the 2008 financial crisis, even the world wars, there's always winners and losers, right? There's always people that come out of it stronger and better. And I do think it's partly, for some companies, it's maybe luck, being in the right position at the right time, but also like having that determination to be like, okay, well, this is the hand I've been dealt, this is how I'm going to deal with it, and then making the best of that situation. I know even from myself with this lockdown for 7 Million Bikes, I mean, we do events, we put on like comedy shows and quiz nights, and it was like, okay, they all stopped. And we thought it would only be for a month and then we'd be back to normal. And luckily we just did one quiz night. I literally thought it would just be one quiz night and then we'd be back to normal. I was like, I'll do it online. And now we've done like 14 of them. We have a regular community of people that come and enjoy it and get value from it and enjoy seeing other people. I mean, now being hired by working with other businesses to do quiz nights and events for them, all online. And I do think it just comes from when it's like, I know it's such a cheesy analogy, but like, you put some pressure on carbon and then it becomes a diamond, right? So there's when things happen and landscapes change, then good can come of it, right?
True, exactly. So yeah, I acknowledge that I'm really lucky. I'm really grateful. I do have space. I'm not in a tiny apartment. I do have a garden. So that helps a lot. But also being able to work online, because I've done that for more than 15 years, like almost 20 years. So it was easy for me to jump back online. I have a big network, both in Switzerland and here. So having a network is key, I think. If you have a good network, if you have friends, the day you need to make some money online, I think it's easier, it's better. Yep.
Awesome. So before we move on, I'm going to ask you the final questions that I ask everyone at the end of season 7 right now, which this is going to be part of. So tell everyone what's the future then for what's I don't even think we've talked about the name of your company. What's the name of your company? What's the future? What's going to happen after what's going to happen after this lockdown? Because you've just talked about how you've done a massive pivot to move online. What's going to happen when you can actually meet in person and we're allowed to go outside?
Yes, so my company is called Spiced, as in Spiced Up. And, we were based in District 1 back in the days when I took over the co-working space, and had so many problems with the landlord, as a lot of people may know. And so I had envisioned a business model where you don't have any space, but you partner with existing co-working space and co-living spaces, and you provide them with community activities, events, and courses, coaching, and so on. So now, after 2 lockdowns, I realized, okay, that was not a bad idea. So I'm gonna develop an online community launching online courses, the first one in October. I'm launching a first workshop on October 5th on storytelling and how to clarify your message so customers understand what you do and pay attention to your message. So that's going to be the first course, October, and more course following up. And I'm going to have a monthly coaching session live as well for the attendees of the courses. And I want to partner with co-working spaces, not just here, but I'm already in touch in Singapore and other countries so that we can have a bit of a network for entrepreneurs. And my mission with, those courses, it's to help people make more money smarter by working less, more efficiently, having automated sales online so that they don't have to work crazy and they can have a better life.
Yeah, because I read, it's a great thing to do, because I read something recently, one of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs make is they just make a job for themselves instead of making a business where they can do less and have more free time. All they do is just even sometimes create more work for themselves, right?
True, and I know a lot about this. It's very hard. It's very hard to delegate and to automate. You just like do everything yourself and then you burn out, which happened to me in the past.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we're going to move on to the final questions that I ask everyone. And then for everyone who's still listening, thank you so much. We're going to then move into a Q&A or even just a comment section. So I'll put it back into like a gallery mode and we can see everyone. And then, yeah, please feel free to ask questions. So the first question, which is relevant to our lockdown right now, if you could get on a motorbike or on the back of a motorbike, if you don't drive one yourself, and you could go anywhere right this second, where would you go?
I would go straight to the beach. I need nature. I miss it. Beach would be my first idea, my first destination. I could consider countryside, nature, Dalat.
No, you can't go to Dalat on a motorbike. Well, you can, but that's a bit of a trip. I mean, like, literally, I mean, the beach Vung Tau is okay. I don't mean like Dalat. Yeah. I asked this question to Nguyen and she was like, yeah, I'd go to my hometown of Quang Nai. And I was like, that's like a 3-day trip. No, I just mean like you jump on, like you go downstairs, you jump on your bike. Because right now we can't do that. We can't even do the simple thing of jumping on our bike. So if you could, let's even make it narrower than the beach. If you could just go jump on your bike right this second, where would you go at 8:57 at night?
Maybe in my favorite restaurant, if we could.
Which is?
Yeah, I have to think. I have too many.
Yeah. No,
oh yeah, Café des Stagiaires. I miss that rooftop.
Ooh, that's a good one. I know, just a new one as well. That's a great one. All right, so I think you've maybe already answered this, but can you maybe narrow it down to just one thing? What's been the one best thing about this lockdown for you?
I think it's my cat giving birth to 4 kittens.
Wow.
4 kittens during lockdown, yeah.
You frisky cat you got there then. She's been out, your cat's been going out getting more busy than you have.
Indeed.
All right. What has been the most challenging thing about lockdown?
I think was to tune to that new rhythm and mostly exercising. So during the first part of the lockdown, we could still go out. I would go for walks every night. And now I'm really missing that. So I'm trying to do stretching and exercising on, every morning, but that's not as fun as going outside.
Yeah, for sure.
Or going to the gym. So that's my biggest challenge.
I've started doing some yoga videos online. Annie, you'll be proud of me. And it's quite funny because I just want to do like some yoga. I just want to do some stretches. And she's what was it, the comment that I do like? So I found this video that I quite like because it's just easy stretches and stuff like that. And she's like, okay, so today you're going to find your authentic self. And I'm like, I think I already am my authentic self. So who the fuck am I going to find? I don't get it. And then today, the other one was, she's like, we're going to stretch the hips. There's a lot of tension in the hips. A lot of our emotional tension is in the hips. And I'm like, I'm emotionally tense. I didn't know my hips had all my emotions in there. But so that's a new one I learned today as well. I got a lot of emotional tension in my hips. Annie, you can make a comment about that afterwards. Annie, I can't see you right now, but you're probably like, what? You do. Annie does as a yoga instructor. That's why I'm calling Annie out. All right. What in Vietnam has shocked you the most since you've been here?
I think it's staff leaving without notice. That was a huge shock. And especially when they tell you, oh, my grandmother passed away, or my grandmother is sick, and you don't even know if it's true or, and you never hear from them. They just block you on Facebook, they block you on Skype, never hear from them. So that was a big shock.
I've heard that, especially from restaurateurs, that the biggest challenge is finding good staff. And a similar thing, because they will just literally disappear on you. So I think that's a common thing, which is unfortunate. And then last question, what in Vietnam has pleasantly surprised you?
I think it's that entrepreneurial spirit that is in the culture. So when I first arrived here, I was like, really, wow, they run businesses in every houses. And even, my staff that had full-time job, they would do gigs on the side, and their parents would run a business from home. And, they're always trying to make an extra buck. And I think there's a job for everyone here. Of course, there's a bit of unemployment, to be fair, but there's opportunities and jobs for a lot of people here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, so thank you so much, Martial. Really good to chat with you. You're very, very welcome. I'm really enjoying this format. We're definitely going to be doing this again then. I was excited to do this. So guys, we're going to open this up now. Let me just change it to gallery view. I've probably said heaps of controversial comments that there's people listening just ready to like tear me down. This is quite an intimidating format, because normally when I do this just at home and it's just me and the guest, and then the episode will go out, and you're not doing it with people listening to you. And I also always know whatever I say, I can edit it out. And I'm always terrified of doing a live podcast. So this has been equally fun and terrifying and intimidating at the same time. But I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I hope you had a good time. I've actually really enjoyed this as well. What I'm going to do, I've just put a link in the chat box. 7 Million Bikes, we are building a community, especially here in Saigon. The expat community has been decimated, as we know, probably up in Da Nang and Hanoi as well. Zion here was the very first ever member of the 7 Million Bikes community. So thank you so much for Zion for that. You can get like a free entry to our events that we do. You've got different packages that you can choose. You get free invitation, or not free, but you get invitations to extra events that we do. You get bonus content as well. You get content where I mess up, which I don't share normally with other people as well. So you get loads of extra kind of perks and benefits. But the biggest thing we're trying to do though is build that community, because we know here in Vietnam it can be difficult, especially for expats or even Vietnamese that speak English, to find English entertainment. So what 7 Million Bikes is doing is providing that, but we also want to bring fun and community and laughter and bring people together. And so, as we mentioned at the beginning, just seeing everyone here today, even on a Zoom call, is really amazing. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. So we're now questions.